So I recall this militia guys coming through, pointing guns at my brother, pointing guns at my sister, point blank, saying that these kids look Tutsi, we're gonna take them out and kill them. And I'm like, but they're my siblings. Like, how does it even make any sense? And so there's a confusion there and a big frustration that was being built up in me, recognizing that, man, like if I remember at 11 years old, just already thoughts going in my head of, man, if anybody touches my any of my siblings, any of my family members, like I'm ready to join the militia group that's coming to take over and just kill everyone, like because it was real. Hi, my name is Kevin Bugingo. I am married to my beautiful wife Nikki. 16 years this July. I'm a girl dad. And I'm dealing with a high schooler, so having fun with that. And grew up as a missionary kid, and man, just God led me to loving the church and excited to just be part of what God is doing through the local church. And this is my faithfully story.
Could you tell me how your faith journey started?
Yeah. So I kind of grew up as a missionary kid. My parents are originally from Rwanda, and they were coming to the U.S. for studies. So my parents initially came in the late 70s, and I was born in 82. And so I always knew God, always was in the church. But honestly, really, the time that I really saw and recognized God being real for me was when, so my family moved back to Rwanda in 1992. And if you know a little bit about the Rwandese story, 1994 was the big genocide. And man, like experiencing such hatred, such um, craziness with people really made me start asking myself at 11 years old, how can this happen? How do people switch like this? And what is the solution? And man, just seeing God's faithfulness with my family through the turmoil and getting out of that situation safely, I just had to literally just be like, man, this God that I worship, on week to week that my parents talk about must be real because there's no way my family could have gotten out of this, alive this way, and a lot of my other extended family as well. So yeah, so fast forward a little bit. So I got baptized at 13, and then fast forward, but my walk 13 till I would say 26-ish. It was really more of a, I believe and let me follow these rituals, let me follow this process. But more so, I think when I turned 26, I was an adult, I was married, and I had to kind of decide, like, okay, I'm going to own this relationship with God and I'm going to walk it through fully. And ever since then, in 2009, when I truly committed my life to him, it was a game changer, and just he just started working me and transforming me, and all my yeses just brought me to a closer place with him and my faith with him and trusting him greater and taking bigger faith steps and landing me in ministry, which was like the last resort that I ever wanted to get into. But yeah, that's a little bit of my story.
Could you share a little bit about that experience? One, were you born there?
So I was actually born in Michigan when my parents were out here for studies. But yeah, so a little bit of the story for me, it was, you know, for me, like I just recall waking up on a spring break and just hearing this news that I guess was devastating in regards to the president's plane getting shot down. And I do recall a few that the years when we moved back, there was starting to build some tension between the two tribes. The Hutu tribe was the one that was in power at the time, and the Tutsi tribe that was kicked out and had been out of the country for about 30 years. you saw them trying to come back and take power. And I recall sometimes, since where we were located was close to Uganda, and sometimes like the threat would get close to where we lived, and we would have to like leave our home and go more in like the city and stay there for a bit. And so I could see and feel the tension, but when that incident happened with the president, it was devastating. And I just recall people knocking at my parents' house, and mobs of people just looking for, are we hiding any Tutsis, and are you Tutsi? And guns being pointed at my siblings because they look Tutsi. And we're hiding at the same time too. Like, people are coming to our house. So we were on a campus, on a Christian university campus, and my dad was the vice president of academics, so he was high up there in leadership, and so a lot of people felt like they would be safe at our house, and I remember like hiding, we're hiding people in our ceilings, in our bathrooms, in our sheds in the back, and some are hiding in. We had like a little farm, cornfield, hiding in the cornfields, and just like, so there's a place of like we want to protect, but then also we're also, our lives are in danger, but understanding like, man, like we can't allow these people, we can't put these people out in front to just be murdered. And so it was a crazy traumatic experience, even just recognizing the differences, because so a little bit of the culture, a little bit of the history there was, back in, I think, the early 1900s, the Belgians colonized the country, and then at the time they started creating these documents and trying to identify people, and so they started to split up people based off of what they look like, and so that's how they created the Hutus Tutsi tribes. Before, we were just one group of people, same language, same culture, all of that. Um, and your culture, or your tribe, was based off of your dad, and so whatever your dad was, you became. So, but there was still a lot of intermarriage between the tribes, and so you looked everyone kind of looked the same to a certain degree, or they looked one or the other, while at the same time, like, it's only based off of what your dad is. So for me, going to that incident when people were barging in and seeing who we, if we're Tutsis, etc. So for me, I looked Hutu, because my dad is Hutu, but he looks Tutsi because his mom was Tutsi, but his dad was Hutu. My mom is Hutu, both parents are Hutu. So my siblings, my older sister, my older brother, they look Tutsi. And so I recall there's militia guys coming through, pointing guns at my brother, pointing guns at my sister, point blank, saying that these kids look Tutsi, we're gonna take them out and kill them. And I'm like, but they're my siblings. Like, how does it even make any sense? And so there's a confusion there, and a big frustration that was being built up in me, recognizing that, man, like, if I remember at 11 years old, just already thoughts going in my head of, man, if anybody touches my any of my siblings, any of my family members, like, I'm ready to join the militia group that's coming to, take over and just kill everyone, like, because it was real, and it was, and didn't even understand it, just getting mad and frustrated at what was happening, and so yeah, I mean, it was like incidences like that was just so traumatic. Obviously, like, it was by the grace of God getting my family out. We were on a campus that had a lot of foreigners, and so if you watch like Hotel Rwanda, you recall like all the foreigners were able to get out of the country through the UN. So me and my sister were Americans, and minors, and so they were able to get my family out because of our citizenship. with America and leaving with a few foreigners. So we left a little bit earlier than most people did during that time. But I do recall, man, one of the hardest things I do recall we had to do is leave at the time. My I want to say he was 5. My 5-year-old nephew was staying with us for spring break, and I remember we had to leave him because his family was like in another city. So we left him with a trusted family that's actually related to uh, his family from but a little bit more extended. But I remember having to leave him. We had to leave him and not necessarily knowing if he was going to get to his parents safely, but trusting that the family was going to take care of him, and which they did, and he eventually did connect with his family. But in a situation like that everything was uncertain, even us, like how our safety and our parents' safety was uncertain, to get out was kind of crazy. But yeah, yeah,
Man, that's
that's
so crazy.
yeah.
Like all the BS that we use to separate people and like
Hmm.
make them different than us and then use that as a reason to hate. It's just wild.
Yeah, yeah.
So what was the kind of missionary work your parents were doing?
So my dad has always worked for the Seventh-day Adventist denomination. So he's always been in higher education, and so the Seventh-day Adventist denomination has a ton of like Christian schools all over the world. And so he specifically was working for a university out in Rwanda. As so he was always in like either a registrar or in like a leadership position in universities for the Adventist school.
So when you were able to escape, how did that experience shape you and your understanding of like
Yeah,
growing in faith?
yeah. Um, so I think really and seeing God showing up in the time of the escape was mind blowing, and I think that's when I started to recognize, like, yeah, because there was so many different barriers and obstacles that we had to go through, and it was just like miracle upon miracle. Like it wasn't like, oh, it was a formula, we did this, do this, do this, and then boom, you're out of there. It was a lot of like, even just getting out of the country, they had closed the border for any Rwandese at the time to like go into Congo, which is I think, yeah, is the Republic of Congo right now, which previously was called Zaire. Uh, they had closed the border, and so my brother, my older brother, my mom, my dad had Rwandese passports, and so for them to get out was a miracle alone. How they opened the border for them. And I recall us kind of sitting there for a while, hours waiting. And to a certain degree, I recall they were trying to detain my dad at the time, and seeing him get out, seeing them release him. Then we cross over, and then it's like, uh, then even financially, how to, we ended up moving. All my brother was at a boarding school in Kenya, and he was on spring break, and so he had to go, sending him back to the boarding school in Kenya. Then me and my family they were trying to get us either back to the U.S. or stationed in Ivory Coast, which was like the somewhat like the division or somewhat of the headquarters for the Adventist Church in Africa. And I recall, like, even just the process of my dad getting a visa to Ivory Coast. There was a point where they retained him in Kinshasa, Zaire, for a moment. They wanted to send him back, and so sitting there and waiting for that to resolve, and then finally settling in Ivory Coast and feeling safe. Um, and I'll get feeling literally like, hey, we can breathe a little bit. Because before that in Rwanda, when all of that happened, I recall we weren't eating. Like my mom would like make amazing meals, and I remember like those the house is smelling amazing, but none of us are eating because it's you're so in it intense and don't even know what what the next knock on the door is gonna create. At night you're hearing grenades going off like maybe 100 yards away, gunshots going off, all these crazy things that were happening. And so being able to like see God's, hand of protection showing up in each points of our escape and getting out, and keeping our family together, was a miracle. And I just knew like, man, this only could be, it has to be this God that I worship has to be real. And crazy enough, I guess cares about me, out of the many people in the world. Because honestly, I say it sometimes when I share my testimony. I honestly knew at a man, there was thoughts in my head of if anything happened to my family, like I'm out and killing everybody, like going and grabbing a machete, grabbing a AKA, and joining the militia and just killing all these Hutus who either killed or hurt my family. And it's crazy to think that like with a turn of events that could have happened, the Kevin Bugingo that you're speaking to right now wouldn't be here, probably dead by the age of 13.
Yeah, that's crazy how like our lives can look drastically different in one moment.
Yeah.
Um, so how did that like help inform you as a pastor too?
Mm. I think the reality for me was that I started to see broken people, because I mean there was so many stories that I heard of like, man, like me and you, Danny, we're grabbing lunch today, and then tomorrow or next week I'm coming knocking at your door asking you to come out and like killing you. You know what I mean? It's like, how crazy is that? How can people switch like that? And I think the what made me start to understand, it helped me start understanding the impact of sin in our lives. And and it really came from a place of like, I feel like it comes from a place of rejection, and lack of love for one another. And so for me, it just, as I kind of explored that further, and again, I've like at that time I was moving almost every 4 years. If at the time, if it was either like we're in the U.S., we're back in Rwanda, we're back in the U.S., Rwanda, and then the war happens, and then we move to Ivory Coast, and then on top of that, this is early 1994, or mid 1994. Then eventually, at the end of 1994, me and my family moved to South Africa. And so that's another crazy experience because like apartheid just ended, Nelson Mandela is becoming president. I'm experiencing a whole nother culture shock, with white people calling themselves Africans, and then still seeing, and then so we moved kind of early, and so you're seeing a lot of you're still seeing some signs of apartheid, like where like bathroom signs are like white bathroom, black bathroom, white water fountains, black. Like I still saw that and it was weird, but they treated me different because I was, a foreigner or American, but you could still see the tension between the white and black. And then all of a sudden there's a group of this whole nother group of people called coloreds, and I'm like, what? Like that is like, it was so crazy to experience that. But one of the biggest things, especially in South Africa, growing up now, I'm like a preteen, teen, learning how to, I was learning a trait in me that I didn't know was gonna transform and be somewhat one of my superpowers, which is learning how to connect with anybody. Just learn how to learn. I learned the universal language for people is love. Like if I can connect with what you're interested in, or if I can make you feel like you're seen, if I can make you feel like you're heard, man, I got your ear, I got your trust, I got your acceptance. And that and so because in South Africa I'm like hanging out with the blacks, learning Xhosa. I'm hanging out with the whites. One of my best friend was Afrikaans. I'm hanging out with the coloreds. Well, had all range of best friends, and it expanded my level of understanding of how to connect with people, but even more so how to love people. What are people really desiring? And so going to answering your question, I started to recognize the solution to all of these, all of our pains, all of our rejections is really love. And as I explored it more, and I started to understand God is the true love, the perfect love. And so that started leaning me towards, okay, the real solution isn't just loving people in my own capacity, but really loving people through Christ's love capacity, and directing them to the perfect love, and helping them find the real solution and the real void that we're all seeking to fill.
Thanks for sharing that. That's so
Yeah.
amazing. So, could you tell me what was your progression like of being called into ministry and your struggle of like, oh, do I really want to do this? Because I think I saw on your LinkedIn you went to business school, and so
Yeah.
you were in business
Yeah.
for 15 years. And so, like,
Yeah.
what was that experience like in transitioning into
Yeah.
the pastorate?
Yeah, I never desired to get into ministry because, again, like I was always around theologians in higher education, and I just saw them as hypocrites, man. Like a lot of them, it's like, they would be preaching or, talking the word, all those things. But then I also see you trying to holler at this girl, or you're meeting up like odd hours. You're having those 10 p.m. Bible studies. I was like, you guys are playing around. On top of that, growing up as a missionary kid, there was like the stigma, right? Of, man, when you serve God, you got to be poor, or you got to like sacrifice, so much for your family, uh, and because I would see so many different opportunities my dad could take that would benefit our family financially, and in my head, I'll be like, why are you preferring to, sacrifice for, you know, I- this is my childhood, childhood type mind that's like, that's like thinking, man, if you get that job, then, you can buy me a better car, or, or you can buy me better presents as a child or something like that for Christmas. But man, like I think that I started to lean in, and look at what the impact was. And so like financially for me, I pursued business. I always kind of had a entrepreneur mind. I think, I guess I always seen that when I was younger. Um, and I first pursued my accounting degree, my undergrad in accounting, then an MBA in finance, ran my own consulting company. I was doing great. 2 years into it, probably around that time, I started to get involved with the parachurch ministry in New England, Massachusetts, and it was really launched from a place of really trying to create revival in Boston. And Boston's kind of similar to New York, very, very somewhat post-Christian, and a lot of intellectuals who believe that, hey, we can explain everything and we don't need faith. And um, and on top of that, I personally think because it's cold in that area, people are cold in general. you know. And so we were just these young guys who just believed in revival. And so one of my good friends, Zenzo Matoga, now leads Impact Church in Boston, just had this crazy vision and dream of, man, what if we unified the body of Christ? I mean, John 17:21. Like, what if we just believe that if we gathered the body of Christ under Jesus and worship Jesus' name, that we can see Jesus be Lord over the city of Boston. And so we started it. He started it. I joined a few years later, and man, I started getting involved with it, and it was so real, so authentic, so just impactful for me. I think 2009, again, going back to my the date where I really committed my life to Christ. Uh, it was through one of those events. It was a big worship. It was a worship night we did at MIT, and I went up and I was like, "Hey, I want to recommit my life to Christ." And ever since then, I got more involved, and I just saw the power of God's local church when they come together. Man, it truly is true when he says it in Psalms 133, man, that he commands a blessing when we're in one accord. And it was, I mean, we were mobilizing from Catholic to hyper Pentecostal. I mean, black, white, old, young, and it just felt like heaven. And I was like, I want more of this. But I started to recognize that the solution, the real in-depth issues are really coming from the local church. This is great serving mobilizing and doing a parachurch thing. It's great and it's needed. But there's deeper rooted issues that we can't experience at a parachurch level if the local church isn't healthy. And so I started to work. I started to create well, I feel like God started to create a hunger in me to serve the senior pastor. I saw senior pastors were gifted with speaking, with the theology was solid. Their even their preaching and just leading vision casting was great, but the execution, the development of people and systems was a struggle. And at least that I saw. And so I just felt like, man, maybe I can be part of that solution again with my business background, understanding strategies, I didn't necessarily understand how much more strategy and leadership I had in me until I just kind of stepped into it. So fast forward, 2013, I was just praying about it and just seeking God's direction on that. And he just spoke to me and just said, "Hey, I want you." Again, mind you, at this point, I'm connected to a ton of churches in New England because the movement had grown and tremendously across the New England states, like different states were doing their own nights of worships. I was leading a night of worship in Worcester, Massachusetts, and so I knew I had a lot of options in the New England area to serve as senior pastor, but God calls me and my family to move across country. Like basically it was December 2013. Here's a faith story. December 2013, God speaks to me and he says, "I want you to move your family March of 2014 across country to Riverside, California, help your brother-in-law who had planted a church out here and learn from him." And I was like, "What? This is like 3 months from now. You want me to move my family across country?" And that's crazy. I'm running my own consulting company. I have most of my clients are virtual, but I had one major client that I was going to regularly in-house. Fast forward March of 2014, we're me and my family are here in California for a 2-week vacation, and it ends up becoming we end up staying. We went back. At the time, even my wife was hesitant. Was when I told her in December of 2013, she was like, "Hell no! Like this, we're not moving across country in 3 months. Like that's crazy. There's so much God is doing here, anyways." But I felt, I felt compelled to it. But I was like, "Hey, God speaks to both of us. It's not just me, and we need to be in one accord." So I left it alone. But come to a 2-week vacation, and mind you, like there was a time where I was gonna pack a suit for that trip just in case, like I have opportunities to connect with some clients or whatever, new and add some new clients. She took that suit out. She was like, "We ain't doing that." Nope, we're just on vacation. We're not trying to find no opportunities out in California. And so, in the middle of our vacation, my wife comes to me. We're visiting my cousin in San Diego, and she's like, "You know what? God spoke to me. Yeah, he did say he did tell me that this is the next move." And I was shocked. I was like, "Wow, man, God, you do like okay, so I do hear you. You know what I mean?" And so, so that last week of vacation, I literally just jumped on, Craigslist and just like looked for clients, new clients out here, and it's crazy. Like that Monday, we're packing up, heading back, flying back, getting ready to fly back. I get two calls, two potential clients who wanted to meet with me. And I asked my wife, I'm like, hey, what do you want to do? Do you want us to fly back and I come back after I schedule these meetings? Or do you want to just stick around another week or two? She's like, well, we're flexible. Let's stick around another week or two. Literally that Friday, I closed both of them. And one of them was a really large client that just made sense. It just made the sense to stay. And my wife is a worship leader and has always been in church leadership, but is also social work by profession. And so my brother-in-law's church, like brought her on stipend type deal to help lead worship for them. And Easter was coming, and so we had to stick around for Easter. And then we eventually went back in mid-May, to like literally sell everything, get rid of everything, and start and just send some boxes and start all over out here. So that's kind of a little bit of a face story of how we got involved. And again, in ministry, prior to that, I was always like serving in the local church to a certain degree. Like I was an elder at a point, leading our youth ministry. But this time, I really wanted to just lean in and actually really get to understand the senior pastor's role and what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. How do you really grow a church? And what are the dynamics that go through that, and managing and growing a church, and some of the things that you think through as a senior pastor. So I started off like literally we were a mobile church, so set up and tear down. Eventually started leading our ushers team. Eventually, was ordained that year. Started leading a youth ministry. We had like 5 kids, grew that to over 100 kids. Launched our junior high ministry, our high school ministry. Developed a team within a year and a half, and passed it on, and then transitioned into the executive pastor role. And so have been in that space since.
What convinced her? Do you know?
Holy Spirit, that was it.
Like, what was
No,
she fighting to?
I think what convinced her again was like the Holy Spirit just spoke to her that, hey, I'm calling you and your family to Riverside to serve and learn and grow in ministry. I think what she was so for me, and so that, you always talk about how like God compliments and brings the right person to you as a husband or a wife. And again, my story is I've learned I was moving almost every 4 years in my life. So change is easy for me. For her, she's originally from Malawi. Her parents came to the U.S. When she was 2, moved into this small city, which is crazy enough, the same city or town, I should call it, that I was born in, Berrien Springs, Michigan. And so, um, her family has been in that same town since she's been 2. So this is like 1983 or something like that. So all she knows is consistency and rhythm and the norm. And for me, I'm like, I get that change itch every 4 years. Like I gotta change something. So for her, when I gave her 3 months, God's calling us to move, she's like, "What? No, like we gotta process this for a year." So for her, she was like, maybe in a year, we could be ready for this move. But 3 months, that's crazy. And so for me, I've had two incidences in my life where we had to uproot and just move, like literally, um, cross cross nations type deal. And so I'm like, I know I can start over with nothing. Where for her, she's like, I mean, we got roots. Just it's like if more so it was because we she was living in Michigan when we got married. She moved to Massachusetts, and so she felt like I'm just now getting roots here in Massachusetts, and now we gotta uproot and go across country. Like that's crazy. And um, so yeah, I think for her, it was just the process of seeing how would how would this come together, and her learning how to just trust the word of God, and just to hear, trust what the Spirit was speaking to her, and know that he's never wrong and always has the best for us.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Like, because for a long time, my life was like hers, because I was just like in one place, even though I moved around, but it was
yeah,
within the city, right?
yeah.
And like I started moving a lot, and then
Mm,
it taught me like, oh, starting from scratch is not a big deal. Like,
it's
yeah,
not a
it's a
big
little
deal.
rough in the beginning,
Yeah,
but like you get used to it. So I'm totally
yeah.
with you. I guess she had no idea who she was marrying.
She
So
was like, I thought I was gonna get this consistent guy. He's not good. We're gonna stay in Brooklyn. No, I don't know where.
so that brings me to my natural. Usually I end
Yeah.
with this. How did you meet your wife?
Yeah, yeah. So me and my wife knew each other since we were kids, probably 6, 7 years old. This was the second time me and my family came back to the U.S. My dad went to Michigan State, so Michigan State, Lansing, Michigan is about 2.5 hours away from Berrien Springs, Michigan, where I was born. So there's an Adventist university there called Andrews University, and it's kind of like the mecca of Adventism. Like all theologians typically around the world will go there to get their MDiv and stuff like that. A lot of like foreigners would go there um, to um, to go for school education. So my one of my uncles was going to school there, and he was really close to my wife Nikki's family. And so when we would come, like every other, some weekends we would just come out and, hang out with them, do church with them, etc. And so I remember, so that's kind of like where we met, like a long time ago as kids. But when my family moved back to Rwanda, this is before Facebook and all these social spaces where you can track people or find people. So we just lost contact. Didn't even know what she even looked like. Fast forward, our senior years in college, we randomly meet at a wedding. And so I remember she was, me and my cousins walk in. She was managing the guest book, and hey, she was looking good. I always tell the story like this because this was right before, or right after Wedding Crasher, came out. And so again, like I'm single, my cousins are single, and we're like, hey, we're about to get the most numbers at this wedding ever, and let's see who gets the most numbers. And I remember, boom, first person we saw, and we were all like, okay, let's see who gets his number first. And so we get into the ceremony. The ceremony wraps up, and I walk out, and she's talking to my older brother. I see her talking to her, and I was like, oh, perfect. Like, because my older brother, he's already like engaged, and so I'm like, he was he was in the groom's party, and so I'm like, easy. He's gonna do a quick introduction, Boom, I get the number, on to the next. As I get in to the conversation, I found out it's Nikki from way back, and so that's when it was like, okay, I can't, she can't be she can't be one of those numbers I'm and so fast forward, we end up exchanging contacts. She ends up never calling me for a whole year. eventually, we eventually reconnect when I came actually to do my MBA at that school, Andrews, that Amethyst school. And we reconnect because she had just finished her undergrad, moved back home, and we reconnect, started dating. Ended up doing 2.5 years long distance because I couldn't afford that school, couldn't find a job. So I moved back to Massachusetts and we did 2.5 years long distance and got married in 2008.
Damn, you have such a wild life. There's so many things like go just right for you.
It's just, I
It's
know, right?
crazy. Like
Just
the
had a,
spiritual life of you, man.
yeah.
Oh, so I have a
So,
question. What is XP Gathering?
yeah. So XP Gathering is a network for executive pastors. So again, like I stepped into executive pastor role. Like I literally created the job for me when when I was at my brother's church, my brother-in-law's church. It's called Relevant Church. I just saw a leadership gap and felt like there was a need for an executive director. Because in my head, I knew in corporate you had like a CEO, COO, all and I was like, we need a COO for where we're at. We were growing so fast, and we needed a somebody to manage our operations, like the whole system and process of what we do. And I didn't know what role, and so I started researching, and I found this like, oh, there's an executive pastor thing role that exists in churches, and so I literally created it for myself for the need of where we were at and stepped into it. Never went to Bible college, never went to, seminary, any of that. I was just, all that, all the theology and teachings that I was just built, I just built it through just me learning, reading books, being coached a little bit by my senior pastor, my brother-in-law, and some other people. Like I did like a school of ministry that we were running at the church for like the summer. So it gave me a foundation. But in regards to like my imposter syndrome creeping in, because it's like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. For the most part, I don't think I do. Um, it got me into a place of feeling lonely, feeling misunderstood, feeling unsupported. And so fast forward 2019, I'm part of this panel at CBU, Cal Baptist University here in Riverside, and it was a panel. The business department was trying to engage business majors to think about a track into executive pastor role. And so I'm on the panel. The business director goes to our church, right? So our church, right, maybe at the time is running about 600-ish or so. But I mean, I'm on the panel with three of our largest churches in Riverside. One of them is like Greg Laurie's church. I don't know if you know Greg Laurie Harvest, running at their peak to 20,000. Another one is Sandals Church, running like at the time maybe 5,000, and another one's the Grove, running about five. And so I feel like a little bit intimidated, I'm like, these guys who've been in this roles for years, and but I step in boldly, knowing what God has called me to, but still. I come to find out after the fact, none of them have ever connected with each other. But I knew there's our senior pastors have. Like I knew my brother-in-law was meeting with some of those senior pastors, and he knew them directly and had contact. And I was shocked that the three largest churches in Riverside are not connecting specifically as executive pastors who I know are the ones who literally know every detail, resource, need that the church has, and they're not connecting. I was shocked. And so I just asked them, I was like, hey, are you guys open to just connecting and just seeing where it goes? Let's just see where it goes. And so we connect. Dan Zimbardi at Sandals hosts us end of December of 2019, and we came out of that meeting asking ourselves, what would we like from this. And the main thing was we're not necessarily seeking coaching. We all have our preferred coaching and consultants that we work with, but we were really seeking peer relationships. We just needed people who are in our space, who are dealing with similar things that we're dealing with, that we can just connect with and feel like, hey, I'm not alone feeling the tension between sometimes the XP and the senior pastor, the tension between, you know, drilling down the vision of the senior pastor down to the staff and not, but still the staff feeling loved by the senior pastor, like being that bridge between them, constantly, having to wear multiple hats because, a position is dropped or somebody quits and you just got to step in until, or make sure that place, that role and responsibility is filled. So XP Gathering really started from a place of helping those in the second chair build relationship that are resourceful for each other and creating a space for replenishment. Because the reality is, a lot of these stats out there, Barna, all those, are sharing stats about senior pastors wanting to quit. But I think if you really looked at a stats of like those in the second chair, and I'm not just talking about executive pastors. I'm talking all the way down to like the youth pastor, to the admin. Those who quit, that retention of those groups of people, man, I think is so much higher because they just feel like, hey, I don't need to make an announcement that I'm feeling like I want to quit, like because they feel like nobody cares. But XP Gathering, we've created a space like, man, we do care because we do believe that you are called too, just the same way as a senior pastor has been called, and you have a purpose to advance this vision at this church, or let me say specifically in God's church. You have been called and to take on this responsibility to grow the kingdom of God. And so don't quit and go back into the marketplace. Let's help you find a safe place where you can be replenished, you can be resourced, you can be in relationship that supports you and encourages you and builds you up to stay in your calling. So yeah, it's a little bit what we do.
Yeah, that's exactly why we created Faithly. Just because, like, when I was
Yeah.
a pastor, I did like children's ministry and youth ministry, and like I had to do it all by myself. I'm like, someone else probably made this mistake. Who can I learn from? You
Who
know?
can I learn from?
Yeah, and it's so crazy that like we're trying to reach, like, there's like 5 churches in the same area, but they don't talk to each other, and we're
We don't
reaching the
talk.
same people, and it's
Yes.
like, why can't we
Yeah.
just share resources? And so it was just mind-boggling. Um,
Yeah.
what are you hoping for at Faithly?
Yeah, what am I hoping for at Faithfully? Man, for me at Faithfully, I'm believing for the community of God, the kingdom of God to come in one accord. I see so much potential in it in regards to even with the main core of our vision, the underlining goal of our vision with XP Gathering is like, man, like if we can bring more ministry leaders, pastors together and build trusted relationships, my belief is that now we can start opening up and having conversations in regards to what my resources are and what my needs are. And I believe, man, if we can be in a community that's safe, we can start solving problems from a place of the church serving each other. Now, God's church serving each other so that no local church has any lack. Living out Acts 2, where there's like no lack in the local church because we're being able to resource all of our needs so then we can actually go out into the community in one accord and actually have true impact and not mini kingdom impacts, right? We can have true kingdom impact. And so that's kind of my belief. And I'm excited about, what Faithfully is putting together because you're bringing the local church together and creating a safe community there. So, yeah.
And how can we be praying for you and your family?
Um, Man, that's a good question. So there's, you know, we recently this year we've had a few uh, family losses that integral family losses, specifically on my wife's side, and it's kind of revealed she's had to work through, some hard. We've had to work through some hard, um, just just trauma, childhood trauma stuff, and even that just not only it initially it feels like it's painful, but man, it what it does create is more intimacy. What it does create is more character. What it does also create is more um, understanding of self. And so that's exciting. It's just an exciting season to be in. We are raising a high schooler and in California, and um, while still helping her develop her own mind and her own understanding of who God is. Still also, trying to navigate the parenting side of it, and how do you parent well and be a good steward of that while still releasing and trusting God in her personal walk. But so yeah, I think the managing, I would say managing our emotional growth at the same time managing our parenting high schooler.
All right, that was great. Thanks for coming on, Kevin.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Danny, for this. I love what you're doing and excited about again Faithfully and the work you guys are doing there, and it's needed. It's needed, and even more so. I say right now we're living in an age where um, information is out there, and man, but connection isn't. And so keep doing this. It's needed, especially for our faith community.
Thank you. Okay, that's
Yeah.
it for the podcast. Bye, guys.
All right. Cool.